Hello and welcome back to the From My Perspective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football landscape that could be changing the football landscape in the very near future. So today, we've got part 3 of something that I've been spreading out across time, and where I'm asking my 5 biggest questions for one specific conference. Now, we've done the SEC, we've done the Big Ten. What's left? We're moving to the Big 12. What I would argue is perhaps the most interesting conference in college football this year, bar none. I think that there's a lot going on, primarily at the top, whenever you have Oklahoma switching coaches, and you've got Texas, and a lot of things that we're about to get to talk about. So before we fully jump into those, make sure you hit subscribe, so that way you can go back and look at the other ones, see the rest of the conferences as they continue to come out, and yeah, just stick around, check out the channel. So the first question is one that I think comes around every year, and is Texas finally back? It feels like every single year, every new coaching hire, every new top recruit that comes in the building, fans collectively sit there and ponder and think, Texas might be Texas again. You know, they might have this giant impact on college football yet again, but I'm not 100% sure that we're really there yet. That's why it's got to be questioned, right? Of course, they did a really good job in the transfer portal. You got a good quarterback in Quinn Ewers. You got Isaiah Nayor, a wide receiver originally from Wyoming. He's now coming to Texas. He's injured, which obviously puts a damper on things, but they were not the only two that came in. They got a lot to bolster the team as a whole, so I really like that. And then with the guys you still had hanging around, you had Bijan Robinson. The O-line still looks pretty good. There's a couple receivers out there that are pretty talented on the Texas team, not even including Isaiah Nayor. So the roster as it stands looks like it could be ready to make a jump. And you're seeing a lot of that respect coming from the polls, whether it be the coaches poll, the AP poll. They were 5-7 last year, but they did get a first place nomination in the coaches poll, and they were the first team out, or the second team out rather, in the AP poll. So they're seen as a top 30 team by both the coaches and the Associated Press. So you've got to be interested at the bare minimum of what this team's going to look like. I'm going to go out and say 8 wins this season feels comfortable to me. I'm not really at the point where I want to put myself out on a limb for Texas, nor am I at the point that I think it's undeserved hype. I can see where it's coming from. There's a clear train of thought that's getting everybody to this point that thinks Texas is going to be very successful. I'm just not fully on the train yet, but I do have a ticket in case that train takes off. So Texas being back, potentially one big thing I want to watch. The next question I have for the Big 12 is, who is the true underdog that makes noise this year? There's a whole list of teams that I'm interested in seeing how they perform. First one that comes to mind is Texas Tech. I think Joey McGuire has been getting a lot of buzz as to what he can do with the program. He's in his first year, so maybe it's a little bit too early for them to take that step, but Texas Tech could be a fun one to watch. TCU, you've got Sonny Dykes there now, very respected head coach, did a lot of good things at SMU. So how does that program look underneath him? Kansas State, they just got Adrian Martinez in, and while yes, he did not look the best at Nebraska, maybe Kansas State was the correct move for him to get on track for this last season and really put them in order. Iowa State, when you look at them, Matt Campbell has been a consistently good head coach. He knows how to put things in order, and they have to move in a new era, in a new direction. So what does their team look like? As a whole, there's at least 4 schools to me that could really mess people up and really cause some issues, and I'm going to go out and say it's Iowa State this year. If I have to predict and attempt to answer my own question without the needed resources, I'm going to say it's Iowa State. They get to 7-8 wins, and then on their schedule they have Texas and Oklahoma. I think they get a shock win over one of those two teams when they're rolling, and kind of sets them up as that team just right below the top tier that if you see them on the schedule or you see them in a bowl game, you're not looking over them by any means. So speaking of Oklahoma, that's the subject of the next question I've got here. And the question is can Brent Venables and can Dillon Gabriel make an impact in year one? One that the OU fans seem to believe that they can. Now, like I mentioned, OU fans are very bought in, and I don't want to say confident, but they're very optimistic about Dylan Gabriel. They seem to think that he can be a similar quarterback and play to the similar level that your Caleb Williamses could have. And while I do not believe that, I get that Jeff Lebby is his former offensive coordinator and they're reunited, but I don't see him having the kind of impact OU fans seem to think he does, or at least the ones that were in my comment section. Brent Venables, I have a lot of faith in. I think he will be good eventually, but he's taking his first head coaching job. It's a big job, and it's a team that just got a lot of kids transferring out. So there's a lot of questions for me personally about where Oklahoma stands. My first question is, who is going to be the primary receivers and who's really going to make noise? Because you got Marvin Mims. He had over 700 last year. He was their wide receiver 1, but numbers 2 through 5 on their yards list are all gone. They're no longer on the roster. Theo Weiss has not logged a catch since 2020. He's listed as a starter currently. Drake Stoops has never had more than 16 receptions in a season. He is currently listed as a starter. So there's a ton of uncertainty there. Their tight end as well. I'm not remembering the name, but I believe he only had just shy of 200 yards last year, so it's not like he was the most productive that they had. So there's a lot in that particular part of the offense, something that they've leaned on so heavily that I don't feel particularly safe betting on or projecting will be good. Another one is the defensive core good enough for a massive turnaround? It's not like Oklahoma was some defensive juggernaut while Lincoln Riley was at the school, and while yes, Brent Venables is very much a defensive-minded head coach and should be able to get their defense in the right order, a lot of production's getting lost, guys. You got your top 3 sack producers, Perion Winfrey, Nick Benito, Isaiah Thomas, they're all gone. You've got your 3 leading interception grabbers, Delaren Turner-Yell, Patrick Fields, Justin Broles, they're gone. That's 2 very key portions of the game that your top 3, your gold, silver, and bronze, have all left the program. I'm very much in a wait-and-see kind of holding pattern with OU right now because there is so much that's uncertain that OU fans seem to be kind of looking over and ignoring. And when you really boil it down, I don't think I can project them in good conscience within the top 10 teams in college football in my top 25s. And I know I've referenced them a lot in recent videos. I had them at like 23, 24, something in that range. You know, the last 5 teams, they were ranked, but they were in the last 5. So seeing how this season progresses for them and seeing how they fix some of those issues, that'll be very, very important. So Brent Venables is a coach that just came in. He should be safe with job security. He'll have some time to work at OU. But on the other hand, there could be some hot seats in the Big 12. So is West Virginia the hottest hot seat? Is it the only hot seat in town? I'm not so sure that I know the answer to this at this point, and I'm not so sure that I would be inclined to say that West Virginia is alone in potentially looking for their next head coach. When you look at the list of Big 12 teams, I've got TCU, Texas Tech, OSU, OU, Iowa State, Baylor. They all feel safe to me, but that does leave a couple of teams. For instance, Texas. If they underwhelm, if Texas is not back, going back to the first question I asked for this, Sarkisian could absolutely be in trouble. They could try to hit the restart button and get somebody in there that they trust a little bit more as Arch Manning comes in and as they're starting to get these recruits coming in. They might want somebody who can be a stable force and not somebody that they're still scared might not be the answer. Chris Kleiman feels fine for now, but a real unraveling could absolutely send him on his way. And then with Kansas, I wouldn't be shocked if Lance Leopold gets kicked out and, things get really ugly and Kansas has to restart. We've seen them do it recently. This would just be his second year at Kansas. So who's to say that he's meant to stay around for very long? It's far from a guarantee that his job security is there. So there's a couple different spots that could absolutely open up. And as you have Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU moving into the conference, teams could get a little bit trigger happy and want to get a new guy in there, somebody they feel a little bit better about as this new era comes underway. And speaking of new eras, the top question I have for the Big 12 this year resides in the peak of the conference. You've got Baylor and you've got Oklahoma State. These are 2 teams that I do believe will be at the top of the conference when the year ends. I think Oklahoma and Texas will follow them up, but 1 and 2 will be some variation of Baylor and Oklahoma State. Now, my question is, can one of them firmly grab the reins and set themselves up to be the Oklahoma of the Big 12 when Oklahoma and Texas leave? this is the time for one of them to do it and set themselves up and become that next true powerhouse in the Big 12. But there are some complications with both teams. Baylor, they might be playing a short game. Dave Aranda would be the first name on most schools' lists if a big job came open, and you can't really rule him out of any spot at this point, with whether it be Auburn or another big SEC job or whatever, some giant program. If it comes open, Dave Aranda could very much be in play. Even Texas, if Texas comes open, why would Dave Aranda not be interested in that opportunity? They don't have guaranteed stability. We don't know for sure yet that he's the type to, get steady at the program and just stay there forever. On the flip side of that, you've got Mike Gundy, who's absolutely that type of guy. We've seen it already, but recruiting to Oklahoma, recruiting to Stillwater more specifically, cannot be easy, first and foremost, and there's a lot still to overcome because they are still viewed as the second best team in Oklahoma, whether that be I think that stays the same when Oklahoma moves to the SEC. So you've got a little bit of an issue there trying to get kids into the building, and they don't really get these five-star prospects. So you've got a mix of veteran leadership and young guys to step up on both teams. The question is, who can do it? Can either of them do it? Do we get a shock Iowa State rising up the ranks year after year and becoming that new team? Do we get Cincinnati stepping in and immediately filling that void? There's a lot to be determined, but for this year, those are the two horses that I'm watching to see who can grab on to it. So what other questions do you have for the Big 12? Are you worried about Adrian Martinez fitting in at Kansas State? Are you worried about, let's say you're worried about TCU and Sonny Dykes and if he fits in there and how long it'll take him to get the team back to running order after Gary Patterson. It was in a bit of a bad state when he left. Not to discredit his full run at TCU, but takes a little bit of work to get TCU back where they need to be. So, I would imagine you guys have a few questions, so be sure to leave them in my comments, or you can go send them to me on Twitter. But for now, that is episode 27 of the From My Perspective podcast, and as always, I'll see you next time.